Hello, welcome to this episode of the 260, where we are talking with Jason Zimmerman. Jason is both a firefighter and a paramedic, as well as a lieutenant at his department, and offers a wealth of experience for us to glean from. In this episode, we are talking about the differences between operating in the rural setting versus the urban setting, juggling the different responsibilities of being an officer, a firefighter, and a paramedic, as well as hearing a personal story of his that highlights the importance of being aware of your surroundings and prioritizing scene safety above all. Let's get into it.
60, 75 hours, 10 seconds.
Mr. Zimmerman, Mr.
Cinnamon.
Mr. Zimmerman. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We're familiar with you, but not everyone may be. Who are you? Where are you from? How'd you get into fire? How'd you get into EMS?
Well, I started off with my family was doing this. So my parents were in EMS back in the 80s and 90s,
Forgot about that.
early
Yeah.
2000s. So most of my younger years was spent in volunteer department dealings, trainings and events and parades and all the stuff that goes with small town USA, first responder type
You were the
stuff.
pediatric mannequin.
Yes, I
for
was.
Many scenarios.
If I had $1 for every time I was backboarded as a child, I would have a great retirement plan. So they retired in 2006-ish, I think. So that was when I kind of got away from it for a while and went to school, high school, that kind of thing, and was like, you know what? I kind of want to do this. They were offering a class. They had a sign out front of the station saying they're offering free MT classes. They needed volunteers and help. So
That's
like,
legit.
I was
Free.
like, okay, I'll do that. You had to sign a contract for like 2 years of service or something like that. But so I did that, sat through basic program with them.
Where is this at?
This was in Hicksville.
Okay.
Large town, 3 traffic lights, a
Ooh.
lot happening. So did that, really enjoyed it. Just always thought it was going to be just a volunteer pastime kind of thing. Didn't realize it was going to be a career. Didn't even know that was an option, really. It was always just, mom and dad would get up at the dinner table, the pager would go off, and they'd leave, and I'd see them again in like an hour. And I thought that's just all it was. Thought that was cool. So I went to college up in Toledo and needed a job. So I had this EMT basic cert, and there was a private EMS that was offering part-time positions. Cool. All right. So I'll do that. I found out that I actually really enjoyed it, even though it was the non-emergent transports, dialysis, totes, discharges. It was still fun. We did some county backup stuff for Lucas County, and that was fun. And getting to deal with local fire departments up there and some of the county stuff, busy system. That was kind of fun. It was neat seeing going from small rural to relative metropolitan and what that brings. The 3 level 1 trauma centers at that time in that city, all within like an 8-mile range. So it was cool seeing the going from like a 3-bed hospital to Toledo that had like 100 beds. And then so that was kind of like, whoa, this is legitimate, you know.
Yeah.
And then realizing that you can actually make a career out of it. Like I'd never worked with a paramedic before. Didn't even know really what they were capable of besides watching Johnny and Roy on TV. But, and then actually getting to work with a paramedic, that was wow. You could actually make a difference. So I ended up leaving Toledo University, which is where I was going to college for respiratory therapy, and went to Owens to get my paramedic instead. So, and then ended up working for a handful of different services, and then wound up back here in Fort Wayne because I wanted to move closer to family, and I really wanted 911 experience. So for most of like Northwest Ohio, Lucas County, that kind of thing, to be able to run true 911 response, you had to be on a fire department. That was really the only way to get into it. And it's like at the time, it was like winning the lottery to get one of those positions. You were fighting for, like 10 slots, and there's hundreds of people taking tests, and they're way more certified than I was. I didn't have any fire certs, so the chances of getting on a department was slim to none. And came down here because of TRA. They were hiring paramedics, and a friend of mine
Which is
was,
when I met you.
Yep. Friend of mine was a dispatcher that I worked with on my volunteer department. Told me, hey, TRA's hiring. Okay. And put my app in, did the whole hiring thing, the super stressful interview with a couple of the supervisors. It's when I first got terrified of Nate Becker for the first time because he was this overbearing, like, once you knew him, it wasn't him, but when you didn't know the man, he was
Yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah.
And so I sat through the interview with that and then the test and was probably one of the most legitimate hiring process I had been through to that point. The rest of them were just like typical job interviews, but they were not a clinical interview, if you will. So that was kind of stressful. And then I remember getting hired, winding up with you and Dale on the
Yeah,
truck.
I remember your first run.
Yeah, I think it was an arrest out off
Yeah,
of 24.
your first run was a cardiac arrest. And I
And that
remember being
was,
like, "Whoa, we're really throwing this dude in the hot
well,
seat."
I don't remember how many crime logs I signed with you and Dale, but
A lot,
it
yeah.
was, I got pretty good at signing my name on that. So
No, you did great, man. I really could tell that you were someone different and someone special who
my mom told me I was special too
not to
all the
not to
time.
besmirch others, but no, I could just tell that you were extraordinarily passionate about taking care of people and doing a good job and hungry for knowledge. And yeah, you've impacted me in that way too. And I think Caitlin too. Like, I don't know, that's why we wanted you on.
I appreciate that. I think what we do matters. I think it needs to be treated that way.
Yeah.
So,
So you talked about your experience, and as I'm just listening to you, I forgot how broad your experience was.
mhm.
Like multiple different county departments in
I,
different cities and different counties, as well as urban
mhm.
experience. What is the difference between all these different roles and I
Um,
guess lenses of EMS
it's
for you?
it's very interesting. So I think I've worked for 9 or 10 different agencies. I think throughout my career. Some of them volunteer, some of them part time. Just kind of filling voids here and there, or needs. It's interesting because so you go from what I would consider a busy service. Trial was a busy system. I think we were running like what 51,000 calls a year, somewhere in that average. And then you go to like I was part-time for a really small Northwest Ohio county department that would run, they were busy at like 3,000 a year,
Hmm.
So two different lenses, you go from having, 18 trucks on a day to two for an entire county, and that was it. So in a county that was, I mean, Allen County is a big county, but the county I worked for up there was also a relatively large, it was probably a 30-minute, 40-minute drive from one end to the other.
Yeah,
And they
we're
would
talking
only,
different challenges
yeah.
here.
And it's only two trucks, and one of them they may send on a non-emergent trip or a transfer from the local access hospital to a larger facility. So you may only have one truck for an entire county of people. Limited resources there, I mean, there was only one department, to my knowledge, that had a full-time fire department, and they were EMT basics at best, and they didn't transport. They relied on the county service entirely. So if you were in that city and you needed help, you would get help. Otherwise, it was relying 100% on volunteer response. So you got to be alone. Like there was always the saying that you're it, no one else is coming. Well, that was literally you're it. Nobody else is coming. So you had to know your trucks, know your protocol, know your resources, know your limitations, and figure out like what way do we got to go here? Like this person maybe needs a specialty center, which we could transport there, but which way do I turn? I need help now. So do I go get immediate help, or do I take them to where the definitive care really needs to be, but it's an extra 45 minutes? So it's like what I think that was the biggest struggle for me was making that determination. Like what am I comfortable with? What can I handle? Versus they always say, well, they need the cath lab, they need the trauma center, but are my skills going to be able to make that patient survive that trip? Can I manage that? Because I don't have anybody else. And I was working with a basic EMT. It was like not like I could bounce anything off of like, hey, what do you think about? Do you think Levofed's appropriate? Well, you level what? Okay, never mind. So that was a challenge. And then you come here, and there's so many hospitals within a 10-minute trip, and the biggest thing is, well, where do they want to go? And then you have to sit and think, well, am I going to get diverted and then take an extra 15-minute drive? The challenge with that is like just volume and trying to keep everybody happy, not
Mhm.
get your charts audited, that kind of thing. But I think that's the biggest difference. And then call volume, I think, is the other thing. It's the rural system. It's even though there was only 2 trucks, we were fairly busy, but not urban busy. It was nothing to run 14 calls in 12 hours in the busy system. And then you go somewhere else and you'd run 1 call in 12. So then it's like staring at a wall, waiting for it to happen. You know it's going to, maybe. That's a whole different stress of like, I don't want to say boredom because boredom I think is dangerous. You should never be bored, but it's like anticipating something big is going to happen. I need to be prepared for it, but we get like 1 or 2 a day. So it's just almost like an anxiety buildup, kind of like.
Now, where are you talking? Like,
So
are you talking about your experience currently?
no, no, no.
Or
This was for one of my really small rural
I'm gonna say,
departments that I worked for.
what's the landscape for you now?
Right now, I'm working for a district within Allen County. We service about 45,000 people, roughly. We've got 3 stations, 3 staff paramedic ambulances, 24 hours. Then we've got 1 staff Monday through Friday with staff chiefs. We service, I think last year we ran somewhere around 3,500 calls of service, most of those EMS. I think we're right in with the national average, whatever that 70-30% range, 70 EMS, 30 fire. But we do both, so that's also, I think, kind of nice that it breaks the day up because you really don't know what you're going to do. Like everyone says, I love EMS. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I love my job now because I really don't know what I'm going to do. Am I going to run into a burning building today? Am I going to go in and get a cardiac arrest ROSC? Am I going to get a water rescue with a drowning victim? Like it's all of that encompassed in one day. You do whatever. It's the biggest challenge for me, one of my biggest challenges is where do I put my gear? Do I hang my coat up on the fire engine? Do I hang it up on a ladder truck? Do I hang it up on the ambulance? Because I'm going on all 3. It's where do I go? So that can be a challenge. And then the other challenge for me was I got promoted last year to lieutenant. So now I'm learning how to be a company officer while filling a paramedic role also. So
I
it's
wanted to
like,
ask you about that. Like, you were wearing 3 hats at once,
mhm.
firefighter, paramedic, and lieutenant. That sounds hard.
It's a challenge. Trying to stay sane, I think, is, and we also kind of struggle with most of us are new officers. We're a rapidly growing department. So we're trying to set the bar, because like if we don't set it later, then it's going to be low or unobtainable. So we're trying to set a good standard now while trying to learn how to be a good company officer, being a friend, being a good human being, also while having, drawing a line in the sand about like these are the rules, these are the expectations. You can't. So it's kind of interesting trying to set that.
Yeah.
How is that for you on scenes? Do you notice that sometimes you have to step back or you're stepping in? Like, how do you navigate having all 3 of those roles?
I've been fortunate at the station that I am at. I usually have a part-time paramedic that picks up with me, usually during the week anyways. So most of the time, if things are going smooth, I'm just a hand. I'm helping out with things that need done. Obviously, I'm a paramedic, so anything that needs done on that level I can do. It's not like I'm hands off. It's not the case. But I found myself more in the role of like, okay, I notice nobody's talking to family. Maybe I'm gonna go do that. Keep them in the loop on like this arrest about what's happening and what their wishes are, finding medication lists and history, that kind of thing. Or I'm not necessarily leading the arrest. Now I'm the timekeeper. I'm keeping track of times, making sure compressors are being switched every 2 minutes, making sure the monitor is all the equipment is available, that kind of thing. I feel like I'm more of a facilitator
Kind of
than.
zoom out and see what cracks need to be filled.
Yeah, more of like a global picture, I think, is where I try to be. Some runs that goes really well, some I feel like I get sucked into the tunnel vision realm, but
It's easy to
um,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's my goal. Whether or not it happens all the time, it definitely doesn't. But and then when I don't have a medic, it gets to be kind of it can be tough.
That's what I was wondering about. So we have been exploring this concept about those who wear so many hats and about how that's challenging. Like, what do you do when you're the only medic? And so you start doing paramedic stuff, but
Mhm.
then your lieutenant qualities need to also be fulfilled, but you're tied up
Hmm.
in a scene, doing things that only you can do at that moment. Like, how do you mitigate that?
So first and foremost, patient care is always the center, right? So
Yeah,
at that moment on that call, my job is to be a paramedic. That is my priority. I kind of need to have in the back of my mind, like, okay, if right now I'm taking care of this lady with chest pain and a structure fire comes in our first zone, I need to kind of keep that in mind too, of like, how are we going to affect that response? But that's also playing the what if game. So that's if that fire happens. Right now, the guarantee is I have a lady with chest pain. My focus is taking care of the lady that my current and now is like the hierarchy, if you will. Mutual aid agreements are there. We have other engines. There's always going to be other calls. I know that I have resources coming for that incident if it happens, but I also try to keep in mind of how many uh, resources that are on this current scene, and if I can break some of those loose when I can, I send them back. If I showed up on the fire engine as a lieutenant and this person requires paramedic skill, well, then the most senior guy is taking my gear off the engine, putting it on the ambulance, and he's filling my seat on the engine. And so there's a lot of days where I'm going through with my crew and we're doing scene size ups and instant command stuff, just like what happens if I take vacation, because we don't have any other lieutenants that get mandatory really. So it's like they have to be able to kind of fill that void. So eventually we hope to get to the point where there's, assessed people that can do those ride outs, but that's to come. We're not there yet. It can be a challenge of juggling really. And a lot of times I find myself like, all right, this person is 100% basic. It used to be like, the side of the truck says paramedic, the paramedic needs to be on there. Well, we have very competent basics. We have very competent advanced EMTs. So if it's something that they are able to manage, I let them go. It's almost, I don't
yeah.
want to say I'm washing my hands of it, but I'm letting the little birds free, fly.
You're delegating.
Yeah, and if it's something that's within their realm and they're comfortable with it, that's the first thing I ask with anything is, "Are you comfortable with this?" And if they say no, okay, and I got it. We'll do this. But, I never want them to be in a situation where they're not comfortable. So that's my first question, and then I look at it as again as a global picture of, okay, I'm gonna ask maybe a couple more assessment questions just to make sure I'm not missing something. And I'm good with it. The other provider's good with it. And then I feel good to step off the truck and then fill that other lieutenant role. That's the daily struggle.
I think it's smart. You said that you identified what was happening as the what if game because it is a seamless game to fall into, and it's very easy to do, and it can really, I think, distract you from the problem at hand sometimes.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, you need to. Of course, we can prepare, and what if this happens? But you also need to rein back in. Okay, well, what's happening right now
Yeah.
at this moment? What
Yeah.
are we dealing with? What's our real estate looking like? And let's start there.
Hmm. Yeah. I've got a problem at hand for sure now that needs dealt with. So how do we take care of this and now?
What do you think your crews do the best at? It sounds like you got some solid clinicians on your crew,
For sure.
as well as communication. It sounds like you guys have to be in constant, efficient communication. Like, but how would you answer that question?
I agree with you. Communication is extremely apparent and awesome and practiced. I feel like within my crew specifically, my shift in general, I think is the same way. And the department in general that I work for, I think, is pretty well in tune to this. Like, you'll run a nasty cardiac arrest, and there's like no talking. Like, it's just everybody knows their role, everybody knows their job, and it seems like everybody's great at filling the voids of recognizing needs, and it just gets done. Most of what we do is EMS. We run a lot of nursing home calls. Where I'm at right now, the station I'm assigned to, I think, has like 9 either senior living facility, nursing home, assisted living type in our first due. So,
Very close to some of your stations.
oh yeah, yeah. We're very, very used to the old 65 and older crowd. So everybody meets C-stat or not C-stat, but C-collar criteria. We're just used to that. I think that's also good because we all know what our roles are. before we ever, before tones ever drop, we have a pretty good in tune of what our clientele is. Also, a lot of neighborhoods, housing divisions, that kind of thing, densely populated areas, similar to what you guys have here in the city. So I think we're very good at being in tune to what our residency population is, the
Yeah.
needs that they have.
What your bread and butter is.
Our bread and butter runs. We also try to have we try to have the what ifs too. We try to plan for what happens if Parkview Regional catches fire. Like that's a big building, lots of things can happen. That could be kind of nasty. So that stuff gets tabletopped, not daily, but frequently. We're throwing some of those curveballs out there and seeing what happens. We've just recently hired a bunch of new recruits, so we're trying to get them oriented to the way that we operate while throwing these curveballs to see how they, I don't want to say behave, that's not the right word, but how they react to something like that. And then how do this more seasoned crew members also integrate into that? And then what can we learn from it? I think the benefit that we have of being such a young department is we're all very impressionable and we all know our weaknesses. We kind of have an idea where our strong points are, and we're very adept to learning. And I think that's something that we're doing a lot of is training really, really hard, figuring out what are we good at and where do we need to focus a little bit more on.
I like that you guys know your strengths and weaknesses. I went to Gathering of the Eagles and they had the keynote speaker talked about his team. And he's like, when I'm stuck, he's a fighter pilot. And he's like, when I'm stuck, my team knows I get really quiet.
Mhm.
And they know that's when to say, hey, buddy, why don't we do this? Hey, buddy, like, what's going on? What's going on in your head? And they know to pull him out. And they know that's a weakness of his, of when stuff's kind of going on, he just kind of shuts down.
Yep.
But they need to know what he's thinking. And so that's really great that you guys talk about that. And okay, like if all three of us were on and I'm like, hey, I'm really bad at med math. I know Taylor's really good at it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, hey, Taylor, can you actually, I think you might be more good at and better at it than me.
I'm sure I got an app for that.
I would
Yeah.
pick Jason. I mean,
Yeah, I'll be like, hey, Jason, can you figure this out? Because I'm really having a tough time.
Yeah, you want me to figure out percanamide? What? Yeah. And I think that's something that I try to do with my crew also. The benefit is I've worked with the same crew for a long time. Actually, one of my guys on my crew, we went to the fire academy together like years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever we took fire 1 and 2. And he was a volunteer at the time, and I had just gotten hired. We've built this relationship over 4 years, and then he got hired full time, and then he's now completed his rookie year and everything. And he's, I think, looking to bid to me permanently. So there's been this several years of building a relationship, and I know his family, he knows my family. There's a really tight thing with that. And I try to make that apparent anytime we're doing a training, talking about anytime we get new people on the crew of where I suck at. I know my weaknesses are, and I know I've got guys on my crew that excel at those points also. And it's not just the EMS side, but it's the fire side too. I know there's things that I'm not good at. And so I try to put that on some of the people that I know are really good and say, hey, this is something I'm trying to learn to be better at. In the meantime, I'm going to pick your brain on it and help me get through this. And, this isn't it's not like I'm the hierarchy dictator of the crew because I wear the bugle. This is a team. We're all in this together. We're all going in to battle, quote unquote, together. We're all taking care of Mr. and Mrs. Smith together. So it's a team approach. And that's the way things get done, I think. And I think all of us on my crew are really good at that. It could be a medical, it could be a fire alarm, it could be whatever. And it's just everybody seems to jive really well. I feel very, very blessed by that.
That's awesome. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And so not prioritize, but strategizing where everyone's going to be and how they're going to do that. Like, I guess optimization would be the word.
Yeah, it's a good word for that.
Something I wanted to touch on were standing orders and protocols. So do you have any standing orders or protocols that you're particularly excited about?
I'm not sure when they roll out. We're getting some new protocols coming up, and one that I find very, very interesting is we're getting ANSEF for open fractures. We're going to be starting early antibiotic care. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be very, very interesting as we roll that out.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So we're kind of looking for, it seems to be like over, at least within the last couple of years, we've been on like I don't want to say the cutting edge because I feel like that's a cliche, but we've been kind of one step ahead of the game with our medical director and our current board of like, okay, what are other, not necessarily agencies around us doing, but what are other countries doing? What are other areas in the country doing that is having positive outcomes? And it's all research-based evidence. It's all, like this one with the ANSEF is like, how can we prevent somebody from ever having to be admitted for sepsis? Can we take care of it in the field and just prevent them from buying an ICU bed later? So we have a lot of stuff that I think is progressive that we'll never see the effects of, but getting that in early prevents that person from having a negative outcome days later.
Would you consider that MIH?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. That's preventing maybe a recurrent admission or a discharge for them to come back and keep calling later.
MIH being mobile integrated health,
Mhm.
basically bringing the hospital or a component of the hospital to someone outside of the hospital.
Yeah, I think that definitely is. I mean, we're not necessarily coming out in like a community paramedicine type role, but if we can maybe prevent a recurrent call, yeah, I definitely see that as that aspect.
That's super cool.
So I think I'm pretty excited about that. Along with we're getting, I believe, Toradol or Tramadol, so we can help some of our patients without hitting with a heavy hitter
I like
narcotics.
that.
So because I feel like most of the elderly population that we run on, you mentioned fentanyl or Dilaudid, and most of them are like, nah, I don't want that. You have a shattered pelvis, dude. Like, can I please give you something? So I think it'll be nice to have another method for that. So overall, I'm very pleased with the protocols that we have. They're very, very progressive. We can do a lot of different things. And the best part about it is our medical director that we have is very open to discussion. So if there's ever anything that we want to see changed, he's literally a phone call away with that. So I think
Sounds
it's
like he's
huge.
very open to it.
It's always really nice when you have a medical director that's very active
Yes.
like that. And we're fortunate we have Dr. Scott too, that we can just, hey, what do you think of this?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been doing some trainings, that's one of my job responsibilities is do fire and EMS training for my crew. I did one, I think it was a couple weeks ago. We did a cardiology, just CE daily training, if you will. And there were some things that came up where some of the guys I was working with had some really good questions that I couldn't find on Google. I'm like, man, that's a great what if, and then some of the descriptors that were on some of the things that we were looking at were like, why did they do that? I don't understand what was being the thought process behind that. Literally, my medical director was a text away. I snapped a picture and then some of the questions, and within 5 minutes had this long dissertation reply back about what he thought as an emergency physician about what we were seeing. So having that is just amazing, having that capability. So
Do you feel comfortable sharing who your medical director is?
yeah, it's Dr. Jake Capito is he's with Lutheran Services.
Shout out. I've had nothing but very positive interactions with him bringing patients, and he's always, not always, but there have been several circumstances when he had the time to
Mhm.
kind of take me aside and explain a step or two further that I found super impactful. And
Mhm.
so that's really great that I guess he's available to you guys.
Yep. Yeah, and every run that we have, like it's an activate. So our charts get audited internally, and then anything that is an activate, or I don't want to say above, because like arrest charts, things like traumas, medicals, strokes, all that stuff gets pushed on to the medical director so that he reviews each one of those. And then almost every one that we get a return back in our charting software with a like a training point or something. He always calls out what we did really well. And if there's anything, I don't want to say negative, but something that could be improved on, he puts it in there and then he explains why. It's not just, hey, you should have given this. But then he goes into well, this is the research. This is what we're doing in the hospital. This is what med school taught me, and this is what the protocol states, but this is why it's in there, So, and even things that not necessarily are in the protocol, he has a lot of like, next time, maybe you could try for this. You'll have to call for orders, but just something to keep in mind. There's always training tidbits in that. I find that very, very awesome to have.
Yeah, I feel like when you have your medical director giving you instances to call med control, like that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That shows that they are very involved and that they are flexible and understand that things are not black and white.
Mhm.
And, sometimes it would be convenient, but that's not the way things are.
Right.
We operate in the gray, and they're aware of that, and you need to be equipped to, I guess, handle it.
Mhm.
So you talked with me when you came to try. I was just asking you about your experience in Toledo, I
Mhm.
believe,
Mhm.
and you shared a run you had with me that was pretty crazy. And I guess I just wanted to pick your brain about that if you felt comfortable
Yeah.
sharing,
Yeah.
where you were put in a really dangerous circumstance. And I guess, yeah, could we just talk a little bit about that run and what that was like for you, and I guess how if you've changed at all since then, like
Yeah.
the way you look at scene safety and patients.
So this happened while I was working for one of the services in Toledo that I was working for. It was typically most of the stuff we did was non-emergent transport, but the phone number was available on Google, and if anybody wanted an ambulance, they could get it. So we called them direct calls, and they were not uncommon, but not common, if that makes sense. It's not like we're running them daily, but we may get one, every now and then. The downside with that was the county had no idea that we were running on these calls. So there was like, I don't want to say there's no backup, but there was no backup.
You
You
mean
know,
like law
no
enforcement?
law enforcement, no fire support, no nothing. It was just the ambulance. It was late at night. There's a lot I don't recall from this run. I think it's something that I just tried to shut out some of it because it was kind of a bit much. But what I do remember is enough that makes me know that it happened because there's things that I don't recall, but there's a lot of details that I do. So it's like it had to have happened because I remember the room being like a pinkish red color. So that had to be a thing, right? I remember it was dark. We got called for some medical, abdominal pain, chest pain, one of those two. It required an emergent response. So we went lights and sirens to it. The street we were on was a side street, had like one working traffic light or floodlight for the entire street, and it wasn't anywhere close to where we were. So it was very dark outside. The only lights were coming up basically off of our rig. And so we went upstairs. It was like a duplex style house where there was like a front porch. And then like if you went in one of the doors, you were like on the bottom level duplex. If you went in a second door, there was like a little entranceway and then stairs that immediately went up to the second floor. There was no lights, no nothing on the porch, but the door was open. We went in that door, and we knew the address where we were heading, and went up the stairs. And there was like one light on in the entire residence. And so the way it worked is, if you can imagine this, the entrance side was on the alpha side. You went in up the stairs. You're facing the Charlie side or the rear of the house. So you go up the stairs, you come up to a little landing, and then you make an 80 or a 180-degree turn. And now we're going back towards the alpha side or the front of the house. So that's where the patient was, at the very front A side bedroom upstairs. Or it was, I don't remember if it was a bedroom or what it was. Might have been a living room now that I think about it. Had to have been because there was a TV and a couch in there. And that was the only room that had lights on. I'm young and dumb. I've been doing this for maybe a year at this point as an EMT basic at the time, and hard charging in the house. I'm here to make a difference. I got my bag. We're doing things, and go up the stairs, go right to where the patient was. Didn't think anything about it, and we start doing an assessment. And next thing I know, I hear the very distinctive click clack of a shotgun coming from behind me. Well, that was, I believe they call that a clue. So we turn around and we got a shotgun pointed at us, and this guy starts using all types of explicitives. What are you doing in my house? Da 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 da. And honestly, after that, I don't remember a whole lot. I know I'm here, so things worked out. I know we transported, but a lot went wrong on that scene. There was a lot of scene safety things that I learned immediately. First off, the threat was between me and an exit. I couldn't go anywhere aside jumping out of a second story window, that led to concrete and probably definitely a broken leg, and I get shot anyway. So that was a no-go. Thankfully, in this scenario, from what I remember, the patient explained what was going on, and that de-escalated, thankfully, for us. I can only imagine what would have happened if she wouldn't have had that capacity, so I'm grateful that happened, but I'm like all about lights now. Ever since then, I have a really nice flashlight that I carry, and I'm always checking stuff out. Paying attention. As I pass inside a house now. Like if there's a door open, I'm peeking inside of it. I'm not rifling through people's stuff, but like, what is here that can hurt me?
And who?
And who? So
Yeah.
that's a question I ask too. Is like, are you alone? Is there somebody else in the house? Like, what else is here? Is there any other threats or something I need to be cognizant of? And I find myself doing that a lot now as the officer on the scene. If I have a bunch of providers in a bedroom or upstairs in a hallway, I find myself like naturally holding a stairs. Like I'm just kind of sitting back with my hands in my pocket, just kind of, what's going on outside of where all of my people are. And I've done that, I think, for years, even when I was a provider, was taking a half a breath of like getting a picture of the house and what is going on here before I fully commit. And if something felt sketchy, I may plant somebody at a door saying, "Hey, do you mind just stay out there or go with that person? Like if they want to use a bathroom or something, like, do you mind going back with them?" Like, because things in that instant was literally like a 20-second change in events that could have been life altering or ending. And that happens every day.
It really goes back to, we have our skill sheets and they're like BSIs, am I scene safe? And you go through like that little section of just scene safety. How many patients do I have? Stuff like that. Like that's very important that
Mhm.
as we're walking up, like we're noticing those things. Like, is the car shut off? Are we at an appropriate spot in the intersection where I'm not going to get hit?
Yep.
Is how many people are in this house? Is there dangerous stuff? Is there clues that someone's going to come out and hurt me?
Right.
Is the scene still safe?
Yeah, and it's dynamic, right? So and that's something else I think we need to be prepared for. Just because you walk in and the patient is fine now, and it could be the patient themselves, doesn't mean they're going to stay that way. And I think, and not this run specifically, but I've had a lot of instances where, I've gotten my butt kicked in a dynamic scene by a seizure patient that was postictal and is now very angry and after anything they can get their hands on to hurt me. And not because they want to. It's not like they're doing this on purpose, but it's just part of the disease process. And I think that's something, I agree with you that it's a small little subsection on skill sheets, BSI scene safe. And that's something that's ingrained in us to say because we get points for it. But what does that mean? Like, what should you be looking for? What do you do? Do's and don'ts. And I don't think that is something that's hit on very well in a lot of classes, a lot of things. So I think that needs to be something that's changed. I recently started teaching for one of the local colleges, and I remember I got to teach that day of scene safety and was like, take this seriously. So, and that's like anything, like you were saying, truck placement. Are there power lines involved? That's something very easy also to overlook. And it's like, that could be huge. Then so just things I think having that you get off, don't get tunnel visioned. We're not immortal. I don't carry body armor. So it's like even if I did, that doesn't help really. It's things can change at an instant. So just having that prevention is the best way to keep from getting into that.
What would you tell a new person coming into this? Like, how can they keep themselves safe? And you said prevention.
So the first thing I have, and I recommend this to everybody, is buy a good flashlight. The best one that you can afford at the time, buy it and keep it on you. I don't know for sure that it would help me in this scenario, but having some more lighting coming up the stairs, one, if that individual that initially I perceived as a threat would have seen lights coming up the stairs, we may have not even made it in the house because they see us coming, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is now I make it very apparent who we are and what we're doing. Like I don't know that I announced myself. I think we just, knocked on the door and we came in the house. So now I'm making all kinds of noise, fire department or EMS, or if it's this scenario where everything's dark, I turn my red lights on. So there's flashing happening outside, like so anybody that is quote unquote sane They see flashlights, they hear us saying fire department, and to back that up, there's flashing red lights coming from the street. Well, that paints a picture that I'm not coming to rob them, So
If they hear something in their home, or like they hear a door open,
yeah,
context clues would point to them being an emergency responder.
correct. Yeah, and think of how many scenes that we've all been on where, partying at scenes and we're putting the smallest person through the doorway or a window. Yeah, Caitlin, that'd be you.
I was gonna say, have I walked or had to do that on your
Yeah,
crew?
I think we shoved you through a hole where there used to be an air conditioner, but so things of like that. We do that type of stuff daily, and those are the runs that I think puts us in the most danger because they may not know we're there, or a family member may not know that we're there, and just have an overall picture about what you got going on and makes your presence known. It's not a secret we're there. The whole street knows that we drove up. So who cares if we're yelling inside this house that, hey, we're the fire department or we're the medics or whatever. We're here to help you. Where are you? That kind of thing.
What else would you say to that newer person just about getting into this field? Like, how can they be successful? Whether it's EMS and fire, or something different, just a challenging career in public safety.
I would say, first off, always be hungry for knowledge. I've been doing this for 12, 13 years now, and there's a lot I don't know, and there's a lot I'll never learn just because of how much this can go. So always be ready to learn. Each day comes with a new challenge. Each day comes with a new training opportunity. Embrace it. The other part of that is keep yourself safe. Do things that will only help you. If we all have bad habits and we know those, but try to limit those to once in a while things. I know eating roller dogs at the gas station is not good for me. So I should not do that every time I get a post change, just because I'm at oh, this is a speedway. They got good whatever. Then, well, that's still not, no, don't do that. Take care of yourself. If you need a day off, take a day off. If you need therapy, go to therapy. The doctor says you need medications, take the medications. Whatever it is that's going to keep you healthy, do it. Work out, get outside, have downtime, spend time with family and friends. It's not all about the job all the time. When you're at work, you need to be there 100%. When you're at home, you need to be there 100%. And try and do the best. I know they always say there's a switch you need to flip. Well, that sounds great, but it doesn't happen, and I think we need to be mindful of that also when we notice that work is bleeding over into home life. I need to make a change. And it's not necessarily like, well, I need a new job or I need a new crew. No, but I need to maybe that's the trick of maybe I need to see therapy or I need to talk to somebody that I respect or somebody that I trust and just vent. Maybe that's the clue. And that goes both ways. If home life is coming in and affecting work life, well, maybe I need to figure that out because I think all of that stuff is real and all of that stuff happens. But we're all human and we need to take care of ourselves. I think whatever can keep you healthy is what is the most important thing. And having that other aspect of gaining knowledge, because knowledge is going to help me in my career be safe, but it's also going to help who I'm called to help.
You got any recommendations for us? Anyone that you'd say you want on the podcast? Any podcasts that you listen to? Books, movies?
I mean, I always like a good movie, can't really think of anything specific, but podcasts, I listen to a handful, nothing really what I would say noteworthy. I'm more of a novice I'm not a diehard podcaster, but I think one of my suggestions would happen to already be here. I think Capito would be a great guest on the show. The knowledge that he's got is insane. But
Plug us in.
yeah, put you
Give
in
us
there.
those digits, which you were speaking of Grant Newhouse.
Mhm.
Yeah, we are filmed, which by the time this is released, that podcast will already be released.
Perfect.
Well, Jason, thank you so much.
Mhm.
I appreciate you coming in and sharing your experiences and your wealth of wisdom.
I don't know about wisdom, but I'm happy to share it.
As always, everyone leave it better than you found it.